All right, I'll just read out the prayer. It's lesson 358. No call to God can be unheard or left unanswered. And of this I can be sure. His answer is the one I really want. You who remember what I really am alone remember what I really want. You speak for God, and so you speak for me. And what you give me comes from God himself. Your voice, my Father, then is mine as well. And all I want is what you offer me, in just the form you choose that it be mine. Let me remember all I do not know, and let my voice be still. But let me not forget your love and care, keeping your promise to your Son in my awareness always. Let me not forget myself is nothing, but myself is all. Well, welcome everybody. Our guest today is Shannon Williams. We're going to have a chance to ask any questions later on, and she'll be talking about guidance. So if you've got any questions about guidance, you can ask. Okay, Shannon?
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I want to thank you for asking me to be here. I've been having this vision that Jesus keeps showing me in my mind, and it's one of my taking other people's hands and placing them in his. And I didn't really know what that meant, but I'm just open. And then Annie reached out to me. And so, yeah, I wanted to just thank her for reaching out to me and giving me this opportunity. I don't really like to speak to people like in public, really. But I write, and I do have a blog. So, and I'll continue to add to that what I've experienced with Jesus over the past years, and I'll let Annie know that link so that you can also read those. So my story was I worked in the corporate world most of my life and was a single mother from the time my son was 2 years old until he graduated high school. So to say that I was a stressed out person is definitely an understatement. I remember seeing a thing saying like, I'm not an early bird and I'm not a night owl. I'm some form of completely exhausted pigeon. And that's kind of how I felt, I was just constantly running around, driving to work. I had an hour commute to work. I had a lot going on. And, with the little child that I'm raising and then having all of these demands in the corporate world, it was quite an adventure. But I knew that there was something that I was missing. And I knew there's got to be some kind of way to have peace even in all of this chaos. And so one day, after about, I don't even know how many years, I had the Course in Miracles book sitting on my shelf with the plastic still on it. I peeled the plastic off and I'm like, all right, let me see what this is about. And wow, what a journey it's been since then. But I did, when I first started, I didn't know anything. I didn't know there were teachers. I didn't know there were groups. I didn't know anything really. All I knew is I was reading this book, just like many other, spiritual books that I've read in the past. So I was reading along and I might have done maybe 2 lessons a week. I could barely have time to like eat dinner. So I was kind of not able to practice it the way that he asked us to. And so I got to chapter 8 and I read the line, if you want to be like me, I will help you knowing we are alike. If you want to be different, I'll wait until you change your mind. And it just stopped me in my tracks. I was like, wow, you're saying that we're alike, first of all, which was just like way beyond my comprehension at that moment. And second of all, it's basically no choice, because he's saying, if you want to be different, I'll wait until you change your mind. And I remember laughing at that part, because it was like, wow, like he really is just hitting it home there. He's like driving it home. But I contemplated that for a while. After I read that, I was thinking, wow, Jesus and I are alike. Like, what does that mean? Because I would have never come up with that on my own, for sure. And he says that he'll help me. So, all right. Okay, Jesus, here I am. I'm asking to be helped. My life is chaos. I'm running around like a crazy woman. And, teach me what's going on here, and so I started talking to him all the time. I would read something in the course and I wouldn't know or understand, like, what does that mean? Like, I mean, some of the concepts in the course that he introduces are just way beyond my comprehension at that time. And then I would ask him, well, look at this, like, this just happened. I'm upset. Like, I don't know what is this? Can you show me what this is? And while I was getting a shower, I would be talking to him. While I was getting ready for work, I would be talking to him. I would drive to work an hour and listen to the course and ask him, oh, what does that sentence mean? It was just total curiosity, complete openness, and just curious, and just willingness to be wrong. Willingness to recognize that I don't know anything based on what he's saying in this book. And I mean, that was pretty quickly after reading it, I realized I really don't know anything. And so as I talked to him and asked questions, I would get answers. Sometimes I would have like, a little picture come in my mind, or I would have like a couple words come in, or I would just get a page number of the course. And so I would sit down and read it, or I would have like a lesson title come in my mind. And so I would read that lesson. And so I just started to follow these little prompts that I was being given. And just, and at work, I had this notebook, and I would like go to a meeting and I would have the date and I would like write notes out, the things I had to do that day. Oh, this is this action item. This is that action item. And that notebook started being filled with unforgiving thoughts instead of work. And so I would amidst all of these like to-do lists and like things that like needed to be done and like things that I had to tell my team, like, oh, these are our priorities based on the chief marketing officer. And, then there was like this, I just realized that, this girl really makes me angry, and then I'd be like, all right, Jesus, can you tell me how to see this? Like, because I'm not at peace. And so it's funny because I was just looking over those notebooks not too long ago, and I was like just flipping through and seeing all of these like unforgiving thoughts and asking to see it differently and asking to be shown the truth in the situations that I was perceiving. And like one day I wrote, I just realized, and I gave a specific thing. 3 days later, I wrote, I just realized, and it was the same thing that I had just realized 3 days ago. So I was completely like, and that's the beauty of writing things down, is that you start to realize that like, wow, like how quickly I forget, and how like one of my favorite lines in the course is, you can't learn anything in a state of panic. And that's where I was. I was in a state of panic in life. And so, I just kept writing things down and paying attention to like, what's going on in my mind? What is all this? Something's causing me stress. I don't know what it is. And as I kept doing that and asking and just getting pictures and letting go of things, I started to feel a little more peaceful. Now, I wouldn't say that I was like totally at peace, but once in a while I would have a glimmer of peace. And in that moment, when I would have that moment of peace, I would realize, oh, I can feel this way all the time. But then I would just get back into the craziness of the world and follow. And I was a big people pleaser too, I have to tell you. I mean, I was just somebody asked me to do something, I would move mountains to try to get, to do that for them, even though I had all of these other things going on. So, but as I started to feel that peace, I would spend a weekend, like any time I could on the weekend, and it started to turn into like a whole day on the weekend, where I would read the course and then stop and meditate, and then read the course and then stop and meditate and ask what it meant. What is this I just read? And then I would just go for a run and kind of clear my mind. And I would actually even have like little messages during my run. And then I would come back and I would journal, and then I would read some more. And it was like the days that I spent like that were just so transformative for me. So then after that, one of the weekend days that I was just sitting there, reading, meditating, journaling, my arm in my mind's eye. So this was all in like, basically my imagination, I guess, but it went up like this, and an arm with a white sleeve came down and pulled me up. And I didn't really know what was happening. I was like, what on earth is going on here? Like, I've never experienced anything like this in a meditation. And I ended up arriving in like this really dark attic. And this dark attic, I was just basically sitting on the floor, and there was an oil lamp there, and it was the only source of light. And as I was sitting there, I looked across, and there was Jesus, and his face was glowing from the oil lamp light. And the peace that I felt in that moment was way beyond anything I had experienced to that point. And I was like, wow, you're here. You're here. Like, you actually like mean what you say in this book. Like, you're actually here, and I can talk to you. And I ended up spending hours with him, asking him all the questions, bringing him all these problems. I wasn't sure if I was actually going to get to see him again like that. So I was just, I was like, this might be a one-time thing. I got to get it all in. So I was, I was sitting there and asking him all kinds of things, and it was wonderful. And I came out of that, and next day I had to go to work, and I was kind of back in the grind. But like really, like the contrast of the peace I felt in that attic versus out in the world was such a huge contrast that I was like, you know what? Like, if I had to choose right now, I would stay in that attic forever because it's way better than all of this crap. So anyway, as I asked him questions in the attic, like, there were many different ways that he communicated with me. He would, and I still go there, so I'm talking in the past only because it was like, my first time there, but he would give me little life reviews. Like, so if I was dealing with someone that was very difficult at work, let's just say, he would show me, it's like this whole process of just every single point in time in the timeline of the story of Shannon where I had that same feeling. And I was, I'd be like, wow. And then he would show me how funny it was. Like, all of a sudden, like, the little movie that he was playing would turn into like I would see the humor in it. So I would go in anxious, fearful, crying sometimes. And I would leave there laughing every time. He has a very happy message. And it doesn't matter where you're at on your journey, the message is always happy. And, I can't begin to tell you. I mean, the amount of miracles that I experienced in that attic with him. And every time I went, and I actually write about the specific stories in the blog, which I only have 3 right now, but I have 3 more I'm going to post. But that it was so like things that I thought I could never have peace around. Physical ailments that I thought would never be healed. You know, everything. You can take anything to him and he will show you the truth of it. And I just was so grateful to be able to, you know, join with him like that. So I continued on with him. And any time I would go back to the attic. But, you know, also he was starting to suggest in my meetings with him in the attic that, you know, Shannon, you can take me on your commute if you'd like, you know, if that's really stressing you out, like I'm actually there. So you can like just invite me in there too. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. You know, and I would like, he would be like, but see, then I would just bring him on my commute. So I wasn't like taking him into work where the most stress was happening. I was just taking him on the commute because that's what he suggested. So it took me, I don't know if I was just really slow or, but it took me a while. It took me, you know, a couple years, I would have to say, of forgiveness to like, just really realize that he's like always here, always there. Right. And ultimately, he's the symbol, you know, so ultimately we're one with him. And so he's always there. How can you be apart from something you're one with? So, other ways, and I just wanted to point this out because like a lot of people do ask me, like, how does he communicate with you? Like sometimes it's a voice in my head, right? It's just, read page 52, you know, or I trust my brothers who are one with me. And a lot of times if I don't listen, it will play over incessantly until I have to do it because I just can't ignore it. You know, it's like, it's one of those, and I'm sure you've all had that experience where, you know, you just can't shake something. Like you just don't know. Like one time it was a Little Mermaid movie. And I just kept seeing the same scene from Little Mermaid playing in my head. And I'm like, all right. And I sat down and what is this for? You know, like it's like he'll nudge you along as you know, go along, and he'll keep trying to show you the way, right? So anyway, so that was like, I would have to say like the most transformative thing was when I was able to laugh at something that I came to him in pain and suffering with. After a while, it ended up, like I said, like I was taking him on my commute, then I was taking him to work, practice forgiveness, which is really, for me, practicing forgiveness is just asking him, like, look, I'm acknowledging that I don't know why I'm not at peace and why this is so important, but here I am. I'm feeling really crappy and I don't know anything. So practicing, and then it evolves over time. And so like I used to take all these problems to him in the attic. Like I would go and I would have like, this is happening and I don't understand it. And then it kind of got to the point where it was like, what do you want me to see? Because then I let him drive my path. So it wasn't me perceiving something and then forgiving it. And then, you know, or then asking him, what is this? Then it kind of turned into like, you know what? I'm free in this moment, but what do you want me to see? And I would sit in meditation. I would go into the attic and I would ask him. And that's when he showed me in this attic, there's like, all of these boxes. It was like, it looked like an endless warehouse of like boxes. And he only showed me once. Actually, that was even before a lot of the forgiveness that I had done. But I think he was just playing on my OCD. Because I was like, we need to organize these boxes. But he shone a light in the attic once and I saw all these boxes, and then he started to show me, like he would pull a box to me sometimes when I would ask him, what do you want me to see? He would bring a box and open it and I would look inside. And a lot of times I didn't understand what it was. So I would have to look at him and, you know, really try to figure it out. And and like work with him on it, because it was a lot of times it was something that I wasn't willing or wasn't even aware of at the time. I mean, for example, one time we were doing a workshop. It was a live workshop, and I was a presenter, and I had to I really went through this horrible thing right before it. It wasn't horrible, it was awesome actually, but I had to let go of spiritual Shannon. And I don't know if you guys have let go of that or like seen that, but like this whole idea that like I could be a spiritual person and I could be a teacher, and that, like that, oh, I'm like, ahead of other people in some way. So during this workshop, I really went through a lot with it, because leading up to it, I was just like, oh my gosh, like I vacillated between like, I don't know how to teach. I don't know what I'm teaching, to like, I'm not worthy. I'm nervous. I don't want to do this. Like, this is not for me. But it was too late. I mean, it was like, I remember it was even 3 days before the workshop to present, and I wanted to back out. And so as I was sitting in the attic with him, he pulled over a box to me, and it had like all these little, like, IKEA, like the little balls that kids jump around in. It was just filled with those. And as soon as he opened it, it was like, they all spilled out. And I'm like, what does this mean? And he told me, don't forget to have fun. Don't forget to have fun. Don't take yourself so seriously. What are you doing? And I was like, oh. And from that moment, I was able to have fun with this workshop and just, enjoy it and be in the moment and not worry. But I wasn't even placing the future in the hands of God for that. Like, I was just obsessing about how, what was this going to look like, and how was I going to do this? And so anyway, it's been quite a wonderful journey so far, and I'm still learning. I'm still learning. I still have things that come up from time to time, but I have to say that there was a shift for me. Before it was, I was stressed most of the time, and then I had those moments of peace. Now I'm at peace most of the time, and I have a moment of stress. And that's the journey. That's the beauty of this journey. And I'm so grateful for A Course in Miracles and for Jesus, and, just to take us through this in such a gentle way that I really never felt like I was sacrificing anything, but just gaining so much through it. And one thing I do want to say is that his message is simple, and it's always the same. So no matter what, I started to realize that the messages that he kept giving me were, I'm always here for you. Let me show you the way. And don't take yourself so seriously. That's always the three. Those are the three messages. And honestly, that's really all there is to it. There's nothing else to it but that. I mean, all I have to do is remember that in any moment, and I'm free again. So if you're thinking, people, when I tell them this story, they say, oh, Shannon, that's wonderful. I'm just not there yet. I have to say that you're there now. He is available to everyone. He is there all the time. There is never a moment where he's not accessible to you. I think that's really all I was thinking to share. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, Karen?
Hi, Shannon. It's so good to hear you. I liked everything you shared, as always, but I liked when you shared about, chapter 8, when you read, if you want to be like me, and if you don't, I'll wait till you change your mind. It's so funny how I think everyone can relate that there's something in the course that just drew you in, and for me, it was lesson 46 when I started out with the lessons rather than the text. And it was, God does not forgive because he never condemned. And when I read that, like I said, this is it for me. This is it. You know, this is because I grew up with, you know, like a punishing God and all that kind of stuff. So I saw that there was nothing to forgive because he never condemned, you know? So for me, like I'm getting better at asking, you know. Before it was like what you shared about, it reminded me of rules for decision when you know, you kind of stepped back and instead of you asking him, you let him tell you, you know, kind of thing. You were like, well, you show me instead of the other way around. Like you think you know, and then you ask, you know, type of thing. Did I get that right? Where you kind of did that? Yeah. And we were just talking about that in Rules for Decision today. So, you know, it's like really for me, what I heard you say is you trust and, you know, learning to, you know, remember that we don't know anything, you know, and when we think we do, we really don't, you know, until we just let it go. And it's getting so much easier, but I always love to hear what other people say because, you know, there are times, and I liked what you said about, you know, I'm peaceful most of the time and get stressed out sometimes. You know, it's like I'm not stressed out all the time, you know, and I'm feeling that way lately. I'm feeling more at peace, more, you know, and the stress is not there like it used to be, you know, and that is a beautiful thing. You know, that is a really beautiful thing. And just recognizing that there's nothing and no one to blame ever. You know, it's all coming from me. And when I can see my brother as myself, you know, it's like, it just takes me back to that piece where I created this. What am I doing to myself? Why am I doing this to myself? You know? So, I don't know. I just always like to hear you share. And I don't have a whole lot to ask you right now because I'm just taking it all in. But I appreciate everything you shared and you're always very inspiring. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Karen. I'm so glad you came. I appreciate you. One thing while you were talking, one thing that I was actually thinking to share is that I think for me, the openness and the willingness came because I set the goal for healing right away. So my goal was healing. And when the goal is healing, everything works together for that goal. So what I had noticed in the process with Jesus and like him pointing things out to me was that it's only when I listen to the ego's goals, basically, when I listen to the ego and say, oh, you need more money. And then I take that ego goal on. That's when the goal for healing takes the second seat, right? And so it's only about, oh, that's right. That's not my goal. My goal is healing. Okay, you're in charge. And so, yeah, and doing that and being aware and mindful of that, my only goal, and then letting all the other ones just kind of be, I'm to the point now where even with my job, I know that when I go, I'm a designer, so I do interior design, and I do interior design, not even I'm a designer, but so when I'm called to someone's house, I know it's not for the design, actually. I know that it's not about their house at all. And I also do home staging. So when I go out on these appointments, this is the most interesting part, is that the goal is healing. And I have had and experienced miracle after miracle going to these people's houses, especially the home staging, because it's a one-on-one experience walking through their home. I have had people sit on the floor and just start crying and telling me about their deepest fears right in front of me. You know, it's supposed to be like, we're supposed to be saying like, oh, well, maybe you should move that couch over there. And instead it's like complete opening up and like speaking what's on their heart. And miracle, complete miracle. And, you know, I'm spoken through in those times. You know, like, and then when I'm spoken through, that's when it's like really transformative for them. And I'm just like, wow, I get to like witness this. Like, this is amazing, you know? And so that, I don't know if everyone's familiar with the I am here only to be truly helpful prayer, but I was guided a few years ago now to before I go into any appointment, arrive 5 minutes early and say that prayer and sit with him for 5 minutes. And so I do that every time. And I really sink into that and recognize that nothing is my responsibility. Where a couch goes is not my responsibility. Nothing. It's all him. And this is his appointment, not mine. It's his meeting, not mine. And so, yeah, like, you know, it's like, all right, well, the goal is healing. And it's not about like selling a house fast. It's not about designing the perfect house. It's not about Shannon at all. Shannon doesn't get to say anything. Like, she is, and I love what Kevin read, the prayer that he read, because it's literally like, that's it. Myself, this Shannon, the small s self, is nothing. It's funny because I actually asked him one time, I said, what do I do? Because I was opening myself up more and more to him speaking through me. And I said, what do I do when someone comes to me after a meeting and says, Shannon, I love what you said? I'm like, I didn't say it. That wasn't me. And I always like was all awkward and like stuttering, like, and I didn't know what to say. So I'm like, what do I say? And you know what he told me? He said to tell people, I am the reflection of the Christ in you. I am the reflection of the Christ in you. And that's what we all are for each other. How beautiful is that? How beautiful is it that we are all the reflection of the Christ for each other on our journey home together, walking side by side.
I think, thanks, Shannon. I think Brendan had a question.
Hi, Brendan.
Hi, Shannon. I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to say, last night I was experiencing a lot of intense anxiety and energy, like the most
Did we lose sound with Brendan then, or is it just me?
in the meeting. I was listening to A Course of Love. I was guided by Holy Spirit to listen to it. And I feel like I dropped into my heart center listening to it, just an hour of it. And I don't know, I've been experiencing throughout this meeting like peace that I have never had, and just like very peaceful. I'm at joy. And like listening to you speak and your energy and laughter and everything, being the reflection of the Christ in me, has made me like happy, like just truly happy, just listening to you and getting that. I'm not really sure what I'm trying to say, but listening to you, I felt like some blocks moved around, and I'm not sure how to put it into words, but maybe on some levels something reached me, and I just wanted to thank you for that.
I'm the reflection of the Christ in you. Of course, Brendan, of course. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful to have that transformation, isn't it? And to realize that fear is actually unnecessary. and it accomplishes nothing. There's nothing that it does. Jesus took me through a whole series of experiences in fear. And one of the ones I think that was the most remarkable, I would have to say, is I was finishing up a staging appointment, and actually I was staging a vacant home, and I was driving home on the turnpike, and all of a sudden I just had all this, like you were talking about, like overwhelming anxiety, like this fear. It was a physical feeling. Like I could feel like I thought I was having a heart attack. My heart was beating out of my chest, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm driving down the turnpike 70 miles an hour. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, what is this? And then I saw the ego trying to make up a story about the fear. So like the night before I had watched like this show, and it was somebody threw a cinder block over an overpass and killed someone. So of course I'm coming up on an overpass, and like, it's like, see, you should be fearful. Somebody could throw a cinder block. And I just laughed. I was like, what? But meanwhile, the fear was still happening. So I was like, but it was so ridiculous. I'm like, that story is not going to stick to this fear. I'm sorry. Like, that is just dumb. And I just kept praying, like, Holy Spirit, please take this from me. Jesus, help. Like, what is this feeling? It's horrible. And then it tried to make up a story about my son and how he's not safe right now. And I'm like, what? And that was always a go-to ego story, right? Like, oh, your son, like, you have to protect him, make sure he's safe. You know, so it was always like a really popular ego story that I would actually like, the temptation that I would give into, but this time I'm like, what do you mean? Like, no, he's like, how would I, like, there's no reason to think that he would be in danger at all. And so that one just kind of flew away, you know. It was like, and so it's like these little like ego thoughts that were like coming through, trying to stick to the fear, right? And like kind of it was trying to increase itself. But what I realized with it is that the fear, and I had to sit in meditation with this and everything, but the fear comes first, actually. And then it's attracting thought, like these ego thoughts are coming, because I was completely at peace. And then all of a sudden the fear was there, but there was absolutely no reason for it. And I've never experienced really like that kind of intense fear ever. And so, yeah, it was really interesting for me to see that, like, actually the fear is coming first. So it's just because I'm coming from fear that the thoughts are fearful. So I just experienced like such a transformation into love again. I was just like, it was like kind of like boom, like that's kind of how it felt. And it was like this, oh, okay. And then there were no fearful thoughts anymore. And so, yeah, it's where we're coming from. Like, am I coming from fear or am I coming from love? And then I see the things that are matching up with that. You know, one other thing too is that fear and worry, which I was wrapped up in for a very long time, don't accomplish anything. They don't prevent the thing that I'm fearing and worrying from happening. There's nothing that really comes of the fear and worry except for me not being at peace. And if you really think about that, I was taken down into like really deep level on that thought of like that realization. Like, fear doesn't accomplish anything ever. So what am I doing with it, right? Thanks so much, Brendan. I really appreciate you sharing that, really. And I'm so happy that you are able to feel peace and happiness.
Shannon, those stories really illustrate where Jesus says perfect love casts out fear. it was like a complete turnaround. It's just whoosh, it's gone as soon as you joined with perfect love and coming from perfect love. And, you know, that Bible story of like in Matthew where he says, and which of you by being anxious or fearful can add a single hour to his span in life? Like, fear just doesn't accomplish anything. There's no purpose in it. There's no use for it.
Exactly. Thanks, Annie. Yeah, that's it. And when we're taken into that experience of that, and the recognition of it, it's kind of hard for fear to have any space at all anymore. You know, it's that's why the shift, you know, that like either I'm peaceful. You know, it started out in panic and then feeling little snippets of peace. But then like, as we go along, yeah, it's like, all right, now I'm just at peace and there's nothing worth it to give that up, really. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, Beth, go ahead. You've muted yourself, Beck.
Thank you, Shannon, for being here. It's absolutely wonderful. Thank you. Shannon, my question revolves mainly around when do you know that it's absolute guidance and when do you know that it's fear? I had an experience I probably shared before, you know, with the television in a nutshell, the television broke down. This young man, the technician said, well, I'll get you a new one. I got a feeling, well, don't bother, I'll go and get it. Went to the shops to buy the television. Series of events occurred, and then as I was about to hand over the card to pay for the television, I got this sense of no, don't do it. Came home, stood in front of the television, literally yelled at it as a person and said, well, what is the matter with you? And it turned out that all I had to do was pull out one plug, put it back in, and voila, the thing started up again. So I don't know. You know, so I went through that process and then I went through another process with something else with the kitchen, and I had this sense of discomfort. Now, and then I thought, well, is it a fear? Is this fear? And I just couldn't separate the two, so I ended up cancelling the contract. So I wondered what your experiences have been with when it's actual guidance and not to do something, and when it's a fear, and it's discernment, isn't it? And it is something that I've struggled with in the last 12 months. So I wondered if you could talk about your experiences with that. Thank you.
Just before you do, Shannon, I'd just like to add to that because we've been reading through Helen's notes a lot, and Jesus actually says to her, ask me what to do and what not to do as well. So he includes the doing and the what not to. So that's great illustration like Bet's bringing up about that.
Yes, that is a good question. I too had a hard time discerning at first what was guidance and, you know, true guidance and what was fear. If there was any doubt for me at all as to whether it was Jesus giving me the, you know, guidance, I just would do nothing because, you know, I mean, nothing really has to be done. Let's face it. Like, we can wait, you know. I love your story about the TV, by the way. That's awesome. I love that. So for me, my experience anyway, and that's really all I can speak from, is that, you know, I had many times where I just didn't know. It was like a choice between this or that, right? And it was like, okay, I'm faced here with, I have to make a decision. And I just didn't know which one to do. And so there were times where I would just, and it's so funny, until I really got his voice got really strong, I would say, all right, Jesus, here's a quarter. You're in charge of this quarter. Heads is yes, tails is no. I'm going to flip it right now. And I'm just going to trust that that's you telling me that. Because it's crazy, but it's like, I had to get to that point where I would have completely obsessed into oblivion about it. So I would do things like that, or I would picture Jesus in my mind, and I would say, all right, can you just tell me right now, like, what is it, yes or no? And as long as I formed the question in a yes or no answer, it was pretty easy for me to get the answer from him, right? So I would picture him holding a sign, a white sign with big black letters, yes or no. And I would watch until he held it up, and then I would trust that. And the important part of it all, I think, is the trust. So regardless of what happens in the world, the trust is what's important. So early on, I would do things like that because I just didn't know how else to get the answers that I thought I needed, really. But then as time went on, I would feel into it. So I would have, like, I would ask whatever it is that I'm asking guidance on, I would sit with it. And I would just say, yeah, I would ask for Jesus, but I would also, if it was a yes, I would just notice, really be hyper attentive to how I feel. Do I feel at peace with this answer? You know, is this peaceful or is this fearful? And sometimes it was even hard to tell then, you know, and like I said, I was following his guidance. So if I didn't have clear guidance, I wouldn't do it. Or I would just end up doing something because I had to and say, oh, well, maybe next time. So, you know, but now I don't have any choices to make in the world. I let him tell me what to do. And so I'm not looking at, do I do this or do I do that anymore? I don't have any options except for what he tells me. And so, yeah, it's kind of like that. It's like, all right, what will you have me do? And that's what I say in the morning. And that's what I say anytime there's a pause in my day. What will you have me do? And most of the time he says, oh, I have a good story for you. You want to hear a good story on guidance? This is great. One morning, I had a staging appointment in the afternoon, and I didn't have any. And so I had to go and embellish this house, like put pretty things all over it. And I didn't have any pretty things left. And so I was like, oh no, I have to hurry up. Like I have to get a shower. Like the client is coming up from DC to meet me at this house that she wants to sell. And she's going to let me in. I have to buy all of these things. And I was kind of like fretting about it. I was kind of stressed because I'm like, I don't want to spend money. I'm probably not going to make any money on this project. And I have to go out and actually shop for all these things. So I was kind of like in that mode. I woke up, I did the lesson really quick, kind of rushed through it, got in the shower, just kind of half-heartedly said, be you in charge. And so then I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm rushing. I caught myself doing it because how quickly we can take charge of our day, you know. I caught myself doing it. So I sat down for a moment and I was like, all right, today I'll make no decisions by myself. And I actually read through that whole section because I was like pretty far down the line with all of my momentum of trying to get things done. And so I sat down and I was like, okay, now. And then I stood up and I'm like, all right, now I'm going to go and start shopping for this stuff. So, and then I was like, oh, wait, I just asked him to be in charge. So I said, all right, what will you have me do? And he said, sit down and read a while. And I was like, are you kidding me? I don't have time for that. I do not have time at all to do that right now. But I'm like, all right, I asked, he answered, I'm going to do it. And he told me what section. I sat down, I read it. And wow, talk about the peace and the transformation and kind of like the setting aside of the ego and just letting it go. Like, who cares? It's like pretty things in a house. Like, is that really important? So, so then I was like, all right, so can I get in my car now? You know, should I go now? And he said, yes. And he told me where to go. And when I got into the store, he told me exactly what aisle. He said, like, turn left, turn right, turn left. And I got right to this little sales section where everything was like half off, and it was everything I needed. And I needed one more little thing, and I had to drive about 20 minutes away to get it. And then I realized, like, oh my gosh, because I sat down and read and all this other stuff, like, I'm supposed to be at her house like in like 20 minutes, and it's like a half hour away, so I'm going to be late. And don't you know, just in that moment, she texted me and said, hey, I'm running really late. Here's the code to the lockbox. Just go in and do it whenever you can. I would have never known that she was not going to come at that time. But guess who does know that, right? All of this has already happened. We're reviewing what has already gone by. So, like, you know, it's like everything, every single part of it, he has that view, right? And so I was like, oh, wow. So I like bought my little thing, and I went over there and set up my little stuff, and it was so peaceful. All day, I just stayed in the peace. I mean, that day could have gone very differently if I didn't stop myself in my tracks and ask ahead of time. And so that's where rules for decision are so crucial, because if we don't make that decision first thing, and then every time and any time that we want to take charge of our day, remembering just to, even for a moment, like, all I have to do now is just say, Jesus, oops, you know, and he'll come back in, you know, and tell me, oh, okay, we'll go do this now, you know. But we can't really, we can only do what we can do. Like, holding ourselves to like crazy standards and thinking that we're going to be perfect all the time is just not, it's just not, it actually puts a wall in between us and Jesus. So it's just more about like forgiving ourselves and letting ourselves do what we can do, and take and when we remember, ask. Yeah.
Shannon, I love you just said we're not perfect all the time, because there was something that it's been something I was really struggled with, and I knew I had a judgment about it for, you know, a long time, and I've just been always like, I just don't get it. Like, I just don't understand this. I knew I had a judgment about it, and, you know, the relief would be to let go of the judgment. So someone was asking me about it the other day, and I was saying, I don't think I'm the one to talk to about this, because I know I'm not good with it. I know I have a judgment about it. And I sat after our conversation and sat and asked, and all I heard was, you're not perfect at everything. And that was the loosening of the judgment.
I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, right? Like, if we're trying to be perfect, then what are we doing? We're basically defending this idea of us being perfect, right? And so it's really great that, and then we want to instantly judge other people and make ourselves that, right? So I love that. That's awesome. Yeah.
Shannon, I've got a couple of questions. One's around, you talked earlier about an illness or pain or something. A lot of people sort of have trouble with illness and pain. Could you expand on something along those lines, and what happened with you, or what you did, or talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. I was actually given a whole other thing recently that I shared on Kate's Zoom to Miracles group too, that I'll share. But the time that I was referring to in the attic with Jesus, it was really funny, actually. I came there in such, like, I was literally felt like I was dragging myself in, you know what I mean? Like, I've had so many different physical things. And I talked to him about that. I brought it up to him, and it was something that seemed that it was going to stick around for a while. Nobody really had a solution as to how it could be fixed. I went to doctors and things. And so I just came to him and I just said, look, I don't know what to do about this. And this is really painful and it's hard. And, he basically showed me this dramatic, like, little movie about how, like, I was like, oh, and like, and like, I don't even know, like, he just showed me like this whole like movie of me just being dramatic and like in pain. And like, for some reason, I don't know how or why or how it even happened, but I was laughing about it. And the next day it was gone. So like, I don't know, like, that's where it's like that one-on-one with Jesus and like really like asking to be shown. Like, I don't think when I went into the attic that day, I didn't think that I was actually going to have ever be able to laugh about something like that. I mean, I was devastated and in pain and suffering and yeah. So, but I ended up laughing about it because he showed me a movie and it was like, the movie was like dramatic Shannon, like thinking like the whole world is out to get her and she's a victim of her body and she has all of these like problems. And for whatever reason, I laughed about it. And it was just all funny to me. And that's all I can say. And that's because it was just one of those things that I just couldn't even believe that he showed me that and I was able to laugh. And he did give me a little process too recently where, cause I was having, and I still have shoulder pain sometimes, like, like back in my shoulder blade area. And I was sitting there and I'm like, like, it's weird that that's there. Cause I go a very long time without it now. And what I found is that if I have it, it's definitely an unforgiving thought. So I know I have to ask him to help me to see what this thought is. And so he had me just say to it, hello, friend, what would you like to say? And the hello, friend actually took all my resistance away for the pain. So instantly there was no resistance anymore. It wasn't something that I was trying to get rid of. It wasn't something that I was trying to fix. It wasn't something that I was going to search aimlessly for some kind of solution for, months or years to come. It was just this little friend that wants to tell me something. And it had a lot to say in that moment. And it was really interesting because a lot of it was a victim story, which is another go-to for, I give into that temptation at times, like that I'm a victim of the body. The body can actually tell me how I feel. So I saw that and, like as I was watching it with him, I was just sitting there with Jesus and watching like this like little friend talk about all of the things that are going on. It just kind of lifted, it lifted out. It was like, and then it was gone. And so what I found is that any physical ailment for myself anyway, if there's something happening physically, it's always a pointer to go inward. It's always saying, you need to look at something in your mind and you should probably look at it now. And so, yeah, like that's kind of how I treat all of that now. If anything comes up in the body or anywhere, if anything, anywhere, it's always a pointer back in. But that little hello friend really took things away for me as far as like resisting it, because when I resist, I'm just blocking the guidance. I'm blocking the healing. I'm blocking and, just remembering that my goal is healing. That's right. And the healing is in my mind. And so let me step back into that goal again. Because if I were to, start going and doing all of these other things and trying to fix it and telling everyone about how much pain I'm in and all of these things, it's just reinforcing that whole idea. So yeah, now I just go inward. But I did all of that. I talked to everybody about it, all the pains in my body.
Shannon, that's just beautiful. Thanks for sharing that story, because Cole's just left, but he has been with us. He's done about 3 sessions with us, and he's basically, that's really his thing, to say, hello, friend. And I mean, it was I got any form of acceptance and allowance opens space for it to be transformed. And Cole is saying exactly the same thing. He literally, hello, friend. How are you? What have you got to tell me? You know, I'm here for you. It's like I go, like, they're like our prodigal sons that we're bringing home, that we've rejected and pushed out and said, ooh, you know, you're not okay. And we've gone, here, I'm opening the door, come home. What do you want to say? And let them have their voice.
Yeah, it really is. Like, I mean, that's something that I hadn't really been guided until recently to do. And it was really helpful for me with something that I was really stuck with. So that hello friend, I mean, that's just a wonderful way of just letting go of, the resistance to it. Kevin, did you say you had another? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because that led me into a question I had. Did you have any like really sticky areas that you sort of seemed to have to come back to? I mean, you know, Jesus is saying, you know, accepting our guiltlessness and, you know, our brother's guiltlessness, and we have projected that guilt onto the world and onto situations and people. And so I was just wondering whether you had any like sticky areas where it was sort of like a bit of a, you know, wow, I'm not really willing to forgive this.
Yes, I have. And I'm still forgiving. Like I said, I'm still learning. It's much easier now to learn than it was before, but you know, it's still, I would have to say things around the body, really. Things around the body. And I think that's why recently I was given that hello friend, because it's a pretty big sticking point. I mean, I have to say it was also with my son. You know, I had a lot of healing to do around my son. He struggled with addiction, you know, for quite some time. Kate and I have a similar story when it comes to that. And talk about fear and worry and just being locked into that. So that was a big one. But I actually, for that one, had to go just experience, like, completely let go of like trying to fix him at all, and realizing that I'm not responsible for him. And I actually had to go the whole way down to the acceptance of his death. If he were to die right now, it was the only way that I could become free with it, really. I was just taken through a whole process and just had to go the whole way with it, because, you know, I don't know if everybody else experiences it this way, but for me, it's like I'll have this experience of forgiveness and I'll just come so close to center, and then like I'll come back out, and then I'll come back in. And it's kind of like this, like, it's almost like this, right? So I would have like this great forgiveness with my son, and I would think it was over. And then next thing you know, kablam, like he relapsed, you know, and he's in the hospital ODing. And so I'm like, and instead of being peaceful around it, you know, there was fear and worry again. And then I was back in the cycle of fear and worry. So it was like this kind of, it's a gentle process, you know, it's not like, you know, I had to face his death right away, but ultimately that's what I had to do to be completely free around that. I actually asked him, I said, what do you want me to do with your dead body? Because you're on a track to die. And I realized that if I have to grieve for you, I don't want to have to try to figure out what you want me to do. Like, do you want to be cremated or buried? Like, that's where I had to take it, because it was like relapse after relapse every 6 months. And, you know, so I would like get free around it at like month 5.5. So yeah.
I like how you say that, you go in and out, because I feel like that's almost like, we're going through, he says, where it's a journey into fear, but you won't be left there. So there's those sort of, for me, like there's almost these deep ones, and I come up and it's almost like sloughing away the edges. That's as much as I can walk into at that moment. So you have a little bit of sort of respite in a sense, and then you're presented with it again and you go a little bit further inwards. And it really is, I have a particular relationship, and it is the loss of that. It represents almost like the loss of God or the loss of love for me, and it's the death. And I have to, I bring up them dying, but it's also just the whole idea of the loss of the relationship. And it's like presented over and over again, and I walk into it as much as I can. And then there's a little bit of a respite, and it plays out in a certain way on the screen. Like they're sort of there and really with me for a while, and then they're gone and come back. But yeah, it's always that walking right into the center of they're just gone. But I've sort of just taken in as much as I can undo, and then just have a little bit of respite and then back into it.
That's been so my experience too, Annie. And what I've realized is that, I've actually changed the way I see these going into fear times. Like when it's almost like, oh, okay, good. So there's more coming up, instead of like, oh no, I have to brace myself. Yeah, right.
Alison T, yes, you got a question or something to say?
Hi, Shannon. I just I have this insomnia that's been going on for years and years and years, and I wondered if you had anything to say about true rest, about where to find true rest, because I'm stumped. I'm actually exhausted at the moment, and I'm a lot more relaxed in my experience of not getting enough sleep than I was. But even so, I'd like to find a better way through.
Yes. Thanks for your question, Allison. He talks about how you can't be tired. And in the Course, I can't remember the exact line, but when I read that, I was like, are you kidding me? I'm exhausted all the time. So yeah, I understand what you're saying. And so for me, when I go into the attic or I join with Jesus, that there is true rest in that. There's like there's like a kind of like letting go of because actually what I've come to discover is that sleep is really just an idol. It's like one of the things that the body claims it needs, right? And if you don't get enough, then that's like the reason to be upset, right? But really, when he's saying we don't need rest, I can't accept that, really. I mean, I couldn't accept that until I started to realize that even when I'm tired, I'm only judging that I'm tired. I'm judging it. So, and I know this is hard to, I know, believe me, I've been in the insomnia place, and sleep, it was very valuable to me. The one complaint I had when my son was a baby is that I got no sleep, and I was like, so mad about that. So it's kind of like letting go of the idea that anything can take away your peace. And as soon as I started doing that around not getting enough sleep at night, because I'll tell you, I think I need 9 hours. And when I can get 9 hours, I get 9 hours. But letting go of this idea of this is what is required, right? First of all, for me to be happy. And then second of all, judging insomnia as not a good thing, because I've woken up in the middle of the night and actually sat and meditated instead of kind of like, you know how your mind goes and you're like, oh my gosh, I need more sleep. Like I have to get to bed. I have to work tomorrow, or I have this to do, or I'm not getting enough sleep. And you just kind of, and then that kind of keeps you up even longer. And I would realize that, oh, maybe I'm awake for a purpose. Maybe there's a reason I'm awake right now. And there were times where I was actually guided to, like, my husband, Jake, he's actually here. He was diagnosed with primary progressive multiple sclerosis. And I was awoken in the middle of the night and to put my hands on him in a certain way. And there was like a healing that happened, and I can't explain it. I don't know anything about it, and I don't even understand what happened. But, so you never know why you're not sleeping. But I would suggest that when you wake up, just ask, what is this for? With curiosity, not like, oh no, I woke up again. Oh no, I'm awake again. I need sleep. Instead, maybe just ask, what is this for? And just see what comes in, like sit in meditation and see what comes in. Maybe there's a reason you're up in the middle of the night. Like maybe it's quieter at that time and there's some kind of, message that needs to come through in the quietest time of the day. You just never know. And so, yes, there is rest in joining with Jesus. Absolutely. It's when I would come out of the attic, I would feel energized. I would feel like I would never need to sleep again in those moments, like especially when I first came out, while I was in it and when I came out. I didn't think I would never need to eat, sleep, do anything the body says that it needs, and then I would start to believe it again. Then I would go back in the attic. But, we're being unwound from these things so gently. And I know that insomnia is not an easy thing to deal with, and it's difficult to deal with at times. But just remember that everything is for healing, for our healing. Set that goal. And so the goal is now healing instead of getting the right amount of sleep. Do you see how that, I don't know if that helped at all.
Thanks, Shannon. Anyone else got questions? I've still got one question. Someone else got a question first? Okay, Shannon, you could just maybe talk a little bit more about forgiveness. I think forgiveness for me has always been a bit tricky, and I think to other people sometimes too, because I often hear people ask about forgiveness in groups. What was I going to say? Because you touched on it before, and everyone touches on it, like say, I have to do my forgiveness lesson, but not many people actually say what they do, what they actually do, and what the process is, and how it works for them.
Sure, Kevin, thank you. Well, part of it is just for me is paying attention to how I feel and then noticing when I'm not feeling at peace. And, I wrote in my notebook at work. So I was like writing down, for me, getting it out of my head is actually a very important part of the forgiveness process. Is once I get it out on paper and I can actually read it, that's why I journal. I mean, I have probably, I don't even know how many pages of journal, like 9 years of journaling. And so part of it for me is writing, is writing it out, like getting the idea out of my head and onto paper. But then, he has wonderful prayers in the course for forgiveness too. Like for me, the take this from me prayer in the obstacles to peace section, he says, take this from me and look upon it, judging it for me. Help me not to see it as a sign of sin and death, nor use it for destruction. Teach me how not to make of it an obstacle to peace, but let you use it for me to facilitate its coming. And I know that's kind of long to say in the moment when you're like having a thing, but for me, it's like when I notice a pattern, you know, and I'm kind of stuck in it or whatever, saying that prayer, like taking whatever it is that is bothering me and just kind of like letting it like float up into the air and just saying, take this from me, that whole prayer. And really with all of my heart, my desire is to know truth and experience truth instead of what I'm experiencing. And then, you know, for also when I'm in the attic and asking him to help me to see it differently. And then him showing me that the life reviews and things like that, like, I think that's when he shows me every single time that I had the same thought or the same experience or the same, like, it's almost like they all get lifted up out of the timeline at once or something. I don't know, but it's very powerful and it's such a shift. And I would have to say that for me, those are the two ways that I practice forgiveness, because for me, forgiveness is literally letting go of any meaning that I place on anything. And so if I'm placing meaning on, just using Allison's example, placing meaning on not getting enough sleep, I'm coming from a place of lack in that place. And he's telling me that I am perfect. I am innocent. God established my worth and my innocence is guaranteed. And so how can lack exist in that, right? And so like what I'm trying to do is come from that place of lack where I believe that I need something that I don't have into a place of I am everything. And so that filling that gap is what forgiveness is for me. And how I do it is using the take this from me prayer or just asking to see things differently. I mean, there are times where I'm out in the world relating to someone and something actually just, you know, brings a little bit of non-peace. And all I have to say now is Holy Spirit or hey, Jesus or whatever, you know, and it's changed, you know, so it becomes automatic over time. But it takes practice and vigilance, especially in the beginning when it's like, it just seems like the ego is kind of throwing some fastballs and curveballs at you. And you're just like, oh, I don't know. How do I even do this? Like, I'm just overwhelmed. And I don't know how I'm going to even like get through this day, let alone try to forgive it, which is really where I was when I started this whole process. But I'm here to tell you that it is definitely worth it whenever you remember to just ask, help me to see this differently.
I think that's important too, Shannon. It's just like start with one thing because it can seem so overwhelming. So just start with one thing and then maybe you get a little bit of loosening and relief around that. And there's the trust that it works. You know, you get a little bit, even if it's just a little glimmer for a moment, that's something to show you there's a little bit of encouragement. Then you can work with the next brick in the wall.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you too, I mean, because when we listened to you today, it just sounded like you were, you know, pretty much you got the course and it's like, hey, Jesus, here I am, you know, and bam, here he was. And so what I was going to ask you, like, did you have any unworthiness come up with him and meeting him and starting to talk with him? Because, yeah, that's sort of not coming across like when you started speaking. So just whether that was happening with you and there was a little bit of, you know, so which was blocking the communication and how that was undone in you.
I felt close to Jesus as a little girl and God for that matter. I mean, I would go to God and pray for him to change things in my life when I was a little girl. I remember begging him, but, and I felt very close to Jesus. And there was a part of me that knew, even as a little girl, that Jesus was a guy and then he was a man and he woke up, you know, there was a part of me that knew that. even as a child. So like, I didn't really have anything. I mean, he was presented to me in such a loving way as a child. I was Presbyterian. I went to church with my grandfather and mom and my sister. And it was just always like this wonderful, he was this just one, presented so wonderfully and so loving and so kind. So I didn't, and as far as unworthiness, I have my share of unworthiness, but it was never in relation to him. So I don't know. Didn't really have, I didn't really have like some kind of block there. And I'm really grateful I didn't. But I still, to this day at times, I mean, like, what is the nervousness with speaking in front of people? Well, that's unworthiness, right? It's like, oh, I'm not good enough in some way, or I'm not worthy to be here speaking or whatever. So, I mean, the unworthiness plays out in many different places still, like where I have to really look at it and let it go. You know, it's again, one of those like, you know, where I'm just constantly letting go of it, because ultimately, really, bottom line is that I don't feel worthy enough for God's love. Or, you know what? I could let go of all of this in an instant. So really, isn't that all what we're doing is recognizing that worthiness and allowing ourselves to be shown, because we are. He tells us in the Principles of Miracles, you are a miracle. I had to really look at that. Do I believe that? Do I believe that I am a miracle? You know, sometimes I might, sometimes not.
Yeah, you are the heaven where his love resides.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Shannon. Anyone else got a question or a comment they wanted to make before we wrap things up? No, looks like we're all done. Thanks. Oops, Alice. Are you waving goodbye, or you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just had a question about like something that I seem to struggle with, this feeling that there are kind of if I put myself out there and I open myself up, you know, to the light or whatever, and then I feel like there are other people just kind of taking on other people's ideas and projections, because we're all in perception, we're all judging, and I seem to take on their ideas about me or whatever, and finding it sometimes this thing that of staying in my own, being able to speak my own truth rather than taking on other people's ideas. I'm just wondering if anyone else struggles with that.
I love that you asked that question. I did the same thing. I would feel what other people were feeling. I would feel what other people were thinking. I could tell when someone was judging me. I could tell really everything. And so like, I would also take on other people's ailments. Like I had a friend at work, whenever she had a headache, she would just come and say, hey, I have a headache, you know, and she would tell me about her headache. And next thing you know, I had a headache and she didn't. Like, it was so weird. And so I understand what you're saying. And really, the thing that I came to terms with is that nothing is personal. Nothing here is personal. Like nothing, like not one thought, not one feeling, not one emotion. There's nothing personal here. And I mean, I really struggle with it. I was afraid to walk into hospitals. I'm going to walk out of there with all these diseases or something. And but in recognizing that nothing is personal, it's just all floating around. All of these little things are just floating around. This idea of, you know, a headache, this idea that, of someone not being good enough. All of these ideas, every single idea that's all it is an idea, and it's just floating around. So if you like picture it kind of like floating around in the air, and so like I can take any of those ideas and I can kind of say, oh, this is personal to me, or I could just let it float by. And so it's like because the ego is like a thought system. It's not like I have this ego and I'm creating all these things. It's actually like, it's like all of these little ideas are like kind of in the system. And if you notice, if you really pay attention, nothing's original in this thought system. There's no new ideas, really. I mean, yeah, sure, people invent things and whatever, but I mean, like at the core, the things that bring us non-peace. I mean, why do you think they say history repeats itself? It's just, there's nothing original, and they're all floating around. So like, I can say, all right, this idea is me, right? And I think that's what I was doing for a long time. You know, when I was little, I remember thinking like, I'm not anything, but I feel like I should be something. And so I started like looking at other people and saying like, okay, well, that looks kind of cool. Maybe I'll be that. And then I, you know, as I started to like form some kind of identity, I was actually consciously saying like, I'm nothing, so I have to be something. So I'm just going to grab like, oh, well, that person does this and I like it, so I'll do that now. And so I was like this patchwork quilt of like all the things that I thought were cool in other people. And then also mixed in were all of these other things that like people judged me about that then I believed. And so it was like this just really chaotic patchwork quilt that was me. And so in my forgiveness process, like really what I was taken through is like cutting it out square by square and just like letting it go. And so now all of those ideas aren't me. They're not part of me. No one, I mean, I have to tell you, like there was a whole year where Jesus just kept saying over and over in my head, nothing outside of you can hurt you, because there is nothing outside of you. And it took me a whole year to really let that sink in on a deep level and realize that like, there is really nothing that can hurt us. There's nothing out there that can hurt me in any way. And so really it's only when we try to defend against the things that we think could hurt us that we're actually bringing some pain into ourselves. I don't know if that answered your question. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Shannon. Thanks very much for coming on. Really enjoyed it. And Annie will post it as soon as she gets around to it.
I was wondering, I have a quote that I would love to end this meeting with, if you don't mind. Yep. It's from the Course, of course. Chapter 4. Be patient a while and remember that the outcome is as certain as God.
Thanks, Shannon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for coming. I really appreciate it, and I enjoyed everything.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon. That was wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.